My name is Sarah Callahan, and the moment that cracked my life down the middle happened in front of 47 people holding champagne flutes at my brother's graduation party. I know it was 47 because I counted them afterward. I had nothing else to do with my hands, while the laughter was still ringing. My father was the one who started it. He had the kind of voice that filled rooms without trying, the voice of a man who coached Little League and ran the deacon board and got invited to every neighborhood cookout because people liked having him around. He raised his glass, smiled the smile I'd grown up believing meant safety, and said, "We are so proud of Derek, first college graduate in this family." He paused just long enough to glance at me across the patio. "Well, first real one." The people closest to him laughed. A few others joined in, the way people do when they're not quite sure what the joke is, but they don't want to be the one who missed it. I was 22. I was standing in the backyard of my parents' house in Nashville, Tennessee, wearing a yellow sundress I'd ironed that morning because I wanted to look nice for my brother's party. I had just finished my second year as a licensed plumber's apprentice. I'd passed my journeyman exam on the first try. I'd gotten up at 4:30 in the morning for 18 months straight, and I hadn't missed a single shift. None of that was mentioned in the toast. My mother laughed too. The small, careful laugh she saved for when my father said things she wasn't sure about but didn't want to challenge. My brother Derek smiled into his glass and looked away from me. I didn't leave the party right then. I finished the potato salad I'd brought. I helped carry dishes inside. I drove home to my apartment 15 minutes away and sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time before I went in. The next morning, I called my grandmother. She was the one who had set up my education fund when I was 7 years old. A small account she'd added to every birthday and every Christmas, every time she sold a quilt or got a little extra from her pension. By the time I turned 18, she told me it held just over $11,000. "Enough for trade school," she said. "Enough to start." When I enrolled in the plumbing apprenticeship at 20, I'd asked my parents about transferring the money to cover my tools and certification fees. My father had told me the account had been drained by fees. "Maintenance charges," he said. "Bank penalties from some kind of administrative error years back." He shrugged like it was old news and handed me a pamphlet about student loans. I believed him. I took out the loan. I worked evenings stocking shelves at a hardware store and paid every cent of my apprenticeship out of my own pocket. I believed him until the morning after my brother's graduation party, when I called my grandmother and asked her, very quietly, whether she remembered the name of the bank where she'd opened my fund. She remembered everything. She also told me she had closed that account herself, at my father's request, when I was 19. She thought I had known. She thought I had agreed to it. She had signed a transfer form, she said, her voice going thin and careful over the phone, that my father told her was for a family investment. She said my brother's name without me having to ask. I told her I loved her, and I'd call her soon. And I sat on my bathroom floor for a while, after I hung up. That was 3 years ago. I did not call my parents after that conversation. Not on Thanksgiving. Not on Christmas. Not when my father texted me a photo of the new deck he'd built and said, "Come see it sometime." I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't send a letter or make a scene. I just went quiet, the way a house goes quiet when the power cuts out, sudden and total. And I got my journeyman license. I joined a commercial crew, based out of Murfreesboro. Spent 2 years running pipe through hospitals and apartment complexes, and a brand new high school on the east side of town. I learned to read blueprints in a trailer with no AC, and to work in crawl spaces in August, and to hold my ground when general contractors tried to cut corners on code. I got certified in medical gas systems, which meant I spent 8 months learning how oxygen and vacuum lines run through surgical suites, work that required clean hands and a steady head and zero tolerance for mistakes. By 26, I was the only woman on my crew certified for that level of installation. By 27, I had enough saved to take on a small partner role in a startup plumbing company run by a woman named Donna, who'd been in the trade for 20 years and was tired of working for people who underestimated her. We called the company Callahan and Cross Mechanical. We started with 3 employees and a van with a leak in the passenger door. Within a year, we had 7 employees, 2 vans, and a contract with a property management group that was renovating 300 apartment units across Davidson County. My life, from the outside, was a straight line moving forward. From the inside, it was more complicated. You don't go no contact with your family and just forget about them, the way you'd forget about a gym membership you canceled. They live in the back of your head, rent-free, and sometimes, in the middle of a job site, when you're 40 feet underground in a utility tunnel and the only sound is the echo of your own tools, you hear your father's voice finishing a sentence you weren't expecting. First real one. I told myself I was over it. I got into therapy and told my therapist I was over it. She looked at me with the patient expression she reserved for things she was not going to argue about right away. I was 28 when my brother called. I almost didn't answer. His name on my screen felt like stepping on a nail you didn't see coming. But I answered, because some part of me had never stopped being curious about how this particular story would end. Derek's voice had changed since the graduation party. It was slower now, more careful, like a man who had learned that words had weight and was starting to respect that. He didn't open with small talk. He said, "Sarah, I need you to know something before someone else tells you." He told me that his second business had failed. The first one, the one my college fund had propped up, had dissolved quietly 2 years after I left. He'd started another one with money my parents had refinanced the house to provide. That one had collapsed as well, and my parents were now 3 payments behind on their mortgage and fielding calls from a debt collection agency about a home equity line they'd taken out to cover business losses they hadn't told me about. "They're going to reach out to you," he said. "They need someone to co-sign a restructuring loan. They're going to tell you it's the only way to save the house." I was sitting at my desk with a set of blueprints spread open in front of me. I put my pen down. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I'm not going to do it," he said. "And I wanted you to hear that from me before they tell you I refused and make it sound like I'm the one who's being unreasonable." I asked him one question. "Did you know what they did with my fund?" "Not until after," he said. "I found out when I was 24. I confronted Dad. He told me you would have wasted it anyway, that trade school wasn't a real education, that he'd done you a favor by saving you from a path that wasn't going anywhere." He stopped. "I should have called you then. I didn't. I'm sorry." The apology landed somewhere between my chest and my throat, and didn't know where to settle. I told him I'd think about it. I hung up and went back to my blueprints, and did not think about anything else for the rest of the afternoon. Before I tell you what my parents said and what I decided, I want to ask you something first. Drop it in the comments. Have you ever had someone come back into your life only when they needed something from you? Tell me what you did. I want to know how far this story travels before it ends. My parents didn't email first. They called. My mother called 4 times over 2 days, each voicemail shorter and more urgent than the last, until the 4th one, where her voice cracked, and she said, "Sarah, please, we just need to talk to you. We're running out of time." My father left one voicemail, formal and composed, which was somehow worse. He said he understood I was busy. He said they weren't asking for much. He said family was family. I drove to Nashville on a Thursday evening in October, which is the best time to be in Tennessee if you have to do something hard, because the light is amber and the air smells like wood smoke, and it almost tricks you into feeling generous. I did not tell them I was coming. I called my grandmother instead and told her I needed to stop by, and I sat with her for an hour drinking sweet tea on her porch while she told me about her garden, and I didn't tell her what I was about to do. Then I drove to my parents' house. My father answered the door. He had aged in a way I hadn't expected. Not old exactly, but settled, like a house that had shifted on its foundation. The confidence he used to carry in his posture had softened into something heavier. He looked at me the way people look at something they've been hoping for, and simultaneously dreading. My mother appeared behind him. She was wearing the same blue cardigan she used to wear on Sunday mornings, and for a second the familiarity of it hit me somewhere I didn't expect. "Sarah," she said, and the way she said it was all relief and guilt at once. I said, "Can we sit down? I have some things to say before we talk about anything else." We sat at the kitchen table. The same table, same chairs. The fruit bowl on the counter had different fruit in it, which was somehow the most disorienting detail in the room. I had brought a folder, not for theatrics, for clarity. I had learned on job sites that when you need someone to understand something they don't want to understand, you put it in front of them in black and white, because feelings can be argued with, and documents are harder to dismiss. I put the withdrawal record on the table first, the one my grandmother had mailed me, her copy of the transfer form she'd signed at my father's direction, the one that had moved $11,000 out of my education fund and into an account with my brother's business name on it. My mother's hand went to her mouth. "I've known about this for 3 years," I said. I didn't say anything then because I needed to be far enough away from it to say it without screaming. I kept my voice even. Years of working in spaces where one wrong move had consequences had trained my hands and my voice to stay calm when my heart was doing something else entirely. "You told me the account was lost to fees. You let me take out a loan. You let me work double shifts. And the whole time, the money was just somewhere else." My father didn't try the fees story again. He looked at the paper, and then he looked at the table. "We were scared," my mother said. "Derek's business was failing, and we panicked. We thought you were strong. We thought you'd be fine." "I was fine," I said. "I made myself fine. That's not the same thing as you not taking something that belonged to me." I set the second page on top of the first. Property records. The first refinance. The second, the home equity line. Numbers laid out in the flat language of financial documents. My father's jaw tightened. "You've been going through our records," he said. "They're public," I said. "Anyone can look them up." I folded my hands on the table. "I'm not here to take the house. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because you want me to co-sign a loan. And before we talk about that, I needed you to understand that I know exactly what happened and I'm not going to pretend I don't." My mother started to cry. Quietly, the way she'd always cried, with her shoulders pulled in like she was apologizing for the inconvenience of her feelings. "We're your parents," she said. "Yes," I said. "You are. Which is why this is harder than it should be." I had not come to yell. I had not come to list every grievance from every year, to pull up the party toast and play it back like evidence in a courtroom. I'd had 3 years to decide what I actually wanted from this conversation, and it wasn't to win an argument. It was to be heard, once, by the 2 people who should have been listening all along. So I talked. I told them about the night I'd sat on my bathroom floor, after talking to my grandmother. I told them about the hardware store shift. I'd worked until midnight in steel-toed boots, because I needed an extra $40 to cover a textbook for my certification course. I told them what it felt like to stand at my brother's graduation and hear my father's voice, in front of everyone we knew, reduce the 2 hardest years of my life to a punchline. My mother kept crying. My father sat still in the way men sit still when they are trying very hard not to feel what they're feeling. When I finished, neither of them spoke for a moment. Then my father said, "We're sorry, Sarah. We are. We were wrong to take that money without telling you. We were wrong at the party. We handled a lot of things badly." He sounded like he meant it. He also sounded like a man who understood that the apology was supposed to be followed by the loan. I had anticipated this. "I'm not going to co-sign," I said. My mother's head came up. "Sarah?" "I'm not going to co-sign," I said again gently, "because I worked very hard to build a credit history and a business that I am not willing to put at risk for a mortgage that has been refinanced 3 times in 10 years. That's not cruelty. That's just math." "Where are we supposed to go?" my father asked. His voice had lost its formal composure. It was raw now, which made it harder to sit across from. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I have some ideas, if you want to hear them." That surprised them. I could see it in the way their posture shifted slightly, the way my mother's hands stilled in her lap. I had talked to Donna 2 weeks earlier. Once I knew this conversation was coming. Donna had grown up moving apartments because her parents couldn't hold onto a mortgage, and she had strong opinions about what actually helped people in housing trouble versus what just delayed the inevitable. She had pointed me toward a nonprofit housing counseling organization based in Nashville that worked specifically with older homeowners facing foreclosure. They negotiated with lenders. They knew which programs existed that most people didn't know to ask about. They were free. I slid a printed sheet across the table. The organization's name, their phone number, the name of a specific counselor Donna had spoken with directly. Call them Monday morning, I said. Tell them exactly where you are. They've seen worse and helped people through it. My mother picked up the paper and looked at it like it was something she hadn't expected to exist. Why would you do this? She said. If you're not going to sign. Because not signing doesn't mean I want you on the street, I said. It means I'm not going to risk my company to cover a problem I didn't create. Those are two different things. My father looked at the sheet for a long time. Then he looked at me. Something in his face had changed. The particular shift that happens when a person stops trying to get what they came for and starts actually seeing what's in front of them. I said an ugly thing at that party, he said. Yes, I said. I've thought about it. More than you probably believe. I believe you've thought about it, I said. I'm not sure yet what to do with that. He nodded. That was the truest thing either of us said all night. I drove back to Murfreesboro in the dark, with the windows cracked and the radio off. My phone buzzed twice before I reached the highway. The first message was from Derek. How did it go? The second was from my best friend Keisha, who had been on standby all evening with a bottle of wine and no agenda. Still alive? I texted Keisha. Come over. She was already on my couch when I walked in, which meant she had a key and no respect for suspense, and I was grateful for both. She handed me a glass before I'd even taken off my jacket. Tell me, she said. I sat down and told her everything, from the documents to the apology to the housing counselor's phone number. She listened without interrupting, which was the thing Keisha was best at when it mattered. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. You did something hard tonight, she said. I did something necessary tonight, I said. I don't know if it was the right thing. I don't know if there's a right thing in a situation like this. There's not, she said simply. There's just the thing you can live with. I thought about that for a long time after she left. Here is what happened in the months that followed. My parents did call the housing counselor. I know because the counselor, with my parents' permission, reached out to confirm that they had made contact and asked whether I had any documentation that might be relevant to their case. I sent over what I had. The lender, presented with the full picture of the loan history and a structured counseling plan, agreed to a modified payment arrangement that bought my parents time to sell the house on their own terms, rather than losing it to foreclosure. They sold it in March. A young couple from out of state, relocating for work, bought it for a fair price. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of Nashville they'd always considered beneath them. My mother called it temporary. My father, the one time he mentioned it to me, called it manageable. I found out through Derek that my father had started seeing a therapist. Derek also started seeing one, which I considered the single most useful thing to come out of the entire situation. He was working a salary job now, project management for a construction firm, the kind of steady work he'd always dismissed as not ambitious enough. He seemed, in the careful and limited conversations we were rebuilding, like a man who had decided to respect the ground beneath his feet, instead of always looking for higher ground to stand on. My mother and I were in early, tentative contact, short phone calls, careful ones. Nothing that promised more than it delivered. I did not go back to Nashville for the holidays that first year, and she did not push. The second year, I went for one afternoon in December, and we ate soup and watched a movie, and she did not make a single comment about my work boots by the front door, which was its own kind of progress. I want to tell you about something we did at Callahan and Cross that spring. Donna and I had been talking for a while about an idea, the kind of idea that starts as a passing comment over job site coffee and slowly becomes something you can't let go of. We had both come up through the trades, at a time when women in plumbing were rare enough that every crew had at least one guy who thought our being there was a kind of experiment. We'd both scraped together tool costs and certification fees in ways that should not have been that hard. We knew what it cost to enter a trade when no one in your family had done it before you, and there was no one to hand you the first set of tools. We started a mentorship and scholarship program through our company. Not a large one. Not a flashy one. We partnered with 2 vocational high schools in Davidson County and offered annual scholarships to cover first-year apprenticeship costs, testing fees, gear, licensing prep for students who were interested in the trades and facing financial barriers. We also offered paid apprenticeship slots in our company for program graduates. We called the scholarship the Foundation Fund. Donna chose the name because, as she put it, everything starts with what's underneath. The first year, we gave out 3 scholarships. 2 of the 3 recipients were young women. One of them reminded me so precisely of myself at 18 that the first time she walked into our shop for orientation, I had to take a minute in the back office before I could go shake her hand without my face doing something unprofessional. I told her what nobody had told me when I was starting out, that learning a trade is not a fallback. It's not what you do when the other options don't work out. It is specific, skilled, essential work that requires intelligence and precision and problem solving. And the people who do it hold the infrastructure of entire cities together. I told her that the hardest part wasn't the physical work or the certification exams. The hardest part was believing you belonged in the room before anyone told you that you did. She wrote that down. I noticed her writing it down. And I thought about my grandmother opening a savings account when I was 7, making her small and steady deposits into a future she wanted to make sure I had access to. I thought about how a thing that seems small can hold everything if you protect it long enough. Here is what I know now that I couldn't have told you when I was 22 in a yellow sundress, counting the people who laughed. Leaving is not giving up. No contact is not a punishment you inflict on someone else. It is a boundary you draw for yourself, a line that says, I will not continue to accept treatment that costs me more than I can afford to keep paying. You are allowed to draw that line. You are allowed to hold it even when the people on the other side of it are crying. You are also allowed to decide, later, under entirely different terms, whether and how much to let back in, not because you owe it to them, because you choose it. Because there is a difference between love as an obligation you fulfill under duress, and love as something you offer freely from a place of actual strength. The first one will hollow you out. The second one, the chosen kind, is the only kind that leaves you intact. What happened to my parents was not my doing, and it was not my responsibility to prevent. I did not take their money and spend it on something that failed. I did not laugh at them in front of a room full of people. I did not go silent for years and then appear at their door needing a signature. I showed up when I was ready. I said the truth out loud in a room where it had never been said before. I handed them a resource that could actually help them. And then I let the math be what the math was. That is not revenge. I want to be clear about that because I know how this kind of story gets read. This is not a story about making people pay. It's a story about finally, after a very long time, refusing to be the one who pays instead. If you grew up being told, in big ways, or small ones, that your path was less than, that your choices didn't count, that you were the one everyone else's success was measured against and found lacking, you are not alone, and you are not less than. The people who said those things were wrong in a way that says everything about them and nothing permanent about you. You're allowed to build something they didn't believe in. You're allowed to be proud of it. You're allowed to let them see it without handing it over. And if someone in your life has shown up recently asking for something after a long silence, I want to ask you this. What did they give you when you needed it? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. From where I stand now, this isn't a story about a daughter who turned her back on her family. It's about a woman who finally understood the difference between being someone's child and being someone's resource. Jessica figured that out. I figured that out. Maybe you're still in the middle of figuring it out, and that's okay. The middle is where most of the real work happens. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If this story sounds like yours in any way, the fun that disappeared, the toast that landed wrong, the door you finally stopped opening, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you are and how you're doing. I'll be here.